Hey folks, we're going to talk about interviewing now. So, one of the things that's really important when you interview is that you understand the basic questions that are going to be asked. There's some standard questions that you want to follow and kind of prepare for. So, the first question is, tell me about yourself. One of the biggest mistakes new candidates make is that they explain their entire life story in the tell me about yourself segment. When you tell a potential hiring manager about yourself, what you really want to do is you want to give them a succinct summary that they can keep in their mind and resonate. Because what you have to understand is that they're going to be going through and asking you other questions. You want to be able to facilitate the conversation. And if you drone on and give a long winded 5 or 10 minute spiel at the beginning, it's going to set a tone that isn't ideal. So, what we want to do is we want to use a very simple approach to tell me about yourself. And one of the things that you want to make sure if you are a graduating student is that you don't say, I'm a student. We want to come off as a professional because professionals get paid more. They are more respected during interviews, and there's more of a chance that you'll get a job and you won't just be offered an internship. So the question is, tell me a little bit about yourself. And what you'd want to do is you'd want to proceed and say, I am a blank specializing in blank, blank, and blank, and I'm looking to use my skills and experience at a great company like blank. So if we were going to fill in those blanks and I was an advertising or public relations student, for example, or a graduating student, excuse me, because we're going to act as if now. We're going to not say that we're students anymore. We are professionals in the field and we are finishing up our degree. That's a great way to frame it. And it's kind of a promise you make to yourself as you become a professional. So we'd want to come off as saying something to the effect of this. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, I'm John DiMarco, and I'm an advertising specialist focusing on social media, graphic design, and media planning. I'm looking to use my skills and experience at a great company like Ogilvy. Now, we want to practice that because it helps us in a few ways. Number one, it's very succinct and it's easy for the hiring manager to remember. Number two, it's very professional. It sounds as if we know what we do and we are focused on how we can help the organization. And number three, by nailing the first question and not being uncomfortable, we are able to get through the other questions easier. So, other questions that are standard include things like strengths and weaknesses, um, future goals, possibly. Um, Another standard question might be, do you have any questions for us? Which is something that we can also strategically use to help our cause. And then there are pivot questions. So the pivot questions are those questions that are going to make us pivot based on what we're asked. We don't know what these questions are. They are typically coming from the job description and all of the um, hard skills that are required for the job. So, for example, if the job required writing, a pivot question might be, well, John, one of the things that we need you to do is write press releases for our new products. Is that something you feel comfortable with? And in that case, you would answer by saying, yes, as a matter of fact, I do feel comfortable writing releases, and I have some examples of different releases that I wrote for internships and part time jobs that I've had during college. I can provide you those samples in my portfolio, and I actually have a few here now if you'd like to look at them. Now, that's a way to really pin the evidence to the question. And that's our goal is we always want to move to showing the evidence. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably saying, well, what if I don't have that skill? What if I haven't done that? In that case, we're going to pivot again, and we're not going to say that we've done it, but we are going to say that we are learning how to do it and we are figuring it out. So we can't know everything, but we can learn anything. So the idea here is that we are going to say something to the point of, if we had a question on SEO, for example, search engine optimization, they say, John, one of the things we need you to do is to monitor our website and manage the SEO. Is that something you have experience with? And in that case, if you didn't have experience, what you'd want to say is something to the effect of, well, I'm familiar with it, but I haven't worked on it yet. I'm actually educating myself by taking a course on Google and watching videos to learn more about SEO. Now, that's an answer that I think is very strong because we don't have the skill. However, we are familiar with this and we are learning skills. So the question is, how do you get familiar with it? One of the things that you're going to do before you go on this interview is you're going to study the job description and the ad that they put out looking for an employee. And you want to look at all those hard skills. And if there are areas that you don't know, that you don't understand, you're going to look up that vocabulary and you're going to kind of figure out what you need to know. Or you may even know it now and it's just under a different name. It might say, corporate communications, and what they really mean is writing press releases, which is something that you may have done. So that standard question, tell me about yourself, is one that you need to go through and you need to practice over and over and over again. And then we have pivot questions. When a pivot question goes to something that you've done, we want to pivot and say, yes, as a matter of fact, we do have experience with that. And hopefully we have some evidence, which is great to bring up and show, because that really puts a check in the hiring manager's mind that you have that skill and that you've practiced it. As far as strengths and weaknesses go, what we want to do is, if they asked about strengths, one of the best strengths to have is problem solving and creativity. So you can always default to that. When they say, what's your biggest strength? You don't want to say something that you're planning to learn. You want to go through and also you don't want to use something that's not tangible. So problem solving and creativity go hand in hand. Creativity is the engine in problem solving, and problem solving is what we do at work all the time. So work is a mesh of problems and projects. So regardless of the job you have, you're going to be encountering problems. And it could be working at a retail job, and the problem is that we have a display that is messy and it needs to be reorganized. That's the problem. The project would be reorganization of the display. In communications, the problem could be we have a crisis on our hands and we need to communicate with our publics to reassure them that this crisis isn't going to affect our day-to-day business activities. So in that case, we would be communicating in a way that would solve the problem, meaning that we may be generating a press release, we may be generating an email, we may be generating a statement to reassure our clients. So the problem was the crisis, and the project was to create the written communication that was distributed to our clients. So these are a couple of examples. Now, one that students always get caught up on is weaknesses. Tell me about one of your weaknesses. You sound like a great candidate, but tell me one of your weaknesses. So this one's difficult, and we don't want to be in a therapy session here and say something to the point of, well, I get disorganized, or I take on too many things at once. Sometimes I get stressed out. Sometimes I get confused. We don't want to reveal any of these issues that may have happened in different instances. We want to think forward. And one of the best ways to strategize this is to use the weakness of being too engaged in content outside of the office. Now, let me explain. One of the things that we need to do when we work on projects is we have to learn about subject matter. So, for example, if you were working as an intern for Coca-Cola, they may say to you, we need to do some holiday promotional posts on social that engage our customers who are um, first line workers, teachers, doctors, firefighters, police officers, nurses. Imagine a campaign that was going to be driven towards these folks. And now you're given that task, you're working as an intern, but when you go home, all you can think about is learning as much as you can about the Coca-Cola brand beyond the 8 hours that you're spending at work. So you find yourself going down rabbit holes on YouTube, watching every Coca-Cola commercial from the 1950s until present day. You find yourself looking at various Coca-Cola bottle styles throughout the years across pop culture, in magazines, in design instances. And now you've spent a lot of time outside of work digging through subject matter. So this is one strategy that I tell students all the time when they're asked about subject matter, or excuse me, when they're asked about a weakness, is to kind of direct it back to subject matter and outside of work. So for example, if they said, John, you know, you're a great candidate, tell me about one of your weaknesses. I might say something to the point of, well, when I worked in publishing, we had to do research on historical events to vet authors. I found myself going home and incessantly trying to learn as much as I could about the history of these instances beyond just what was needed for my job. And it kind of brought me down different rabbit holes. I guess I would call it a weakness because it ended up kind of taking over my personal life, where in some cases I didn't get some of my chores done at home because I was busy watching historical videos on, the History Channel on demand. So you see how I kind of laid that out? And I used it as a weakness in my own life, but I didn't use it as a weakness that could affect the organization. That's the key. We want to have a weakness that doesn't affect the organization. And again, we want to be honest, but we don't need to air all of our issues out when we're asked about our weaknesses. We don't want to go through this kind of laundry list of things that we feel are wrong with us. We want to point to something anecdotally and something that can kind of be brushed over and is an answer, but isn't a detriment to the value that we present to the employer. So the last section is the two questions that you might get at the end, which are, tell me about yourself and what kind of salary were you looking for? So let's address these now. When you're asked, when you're asked, do you have any questions for us? That's the final question and the salary question. When you're asked, do you have any questions about us? This is something that we want to strategically be smart about. We don't want to ask questions that are too difficult to answer for whoever we're being interviewed with. So you have to remember that you're going to be going through an interview process. That process, in most cases, is going to have multiple levels. Those multiple levels include, first, the hiring manager from HR. So your hiring manager from HR is somebody that has a sheet on you and possibly doesn't really know that much about the job. They've got some basic questions they want to ask. They're ensuring that you are a viable candidate to get to the next level, but they can't really define exactly what the job is and explicitly explain the day-to-day because they aren't doing that job. They're doing HR. So they're a filter right now to get you to the next level. So they're going to ask a lot of general questions, which is good. So if they said, do you have any questions for us? A great question is, do you have any learning opportunities? Because I'm always looking to build my skills. And this is a question that can be answered by not only the HR manager, but also it could be answered by a hiring manager that would be interviewing you. The HR manager knows about training programs, and the hiring manager is most likely going to be your superior, your boss, and they would be helping you or approving you doing professional development. So this is a great question. It works on any level. I'm interested to know, do you have any learning opportunities? Because I'm always trying to build up my skills. And in that case, they might say something like, well, we give you a stipend to take a course with manager approval. They might say, we've got LinkedIn Learning that you can use on your own, free of charge. They might tell you that they have different courses with different companies like Coursera or Google that you can take. So this is a great question. And that's really one of the most important elements that you want to show is you want to show that you're always learning. And we want to show off the big 4 skills, which are research, writing, technology and design, and speaking and presentation. Anytime we can pivot to talk about those, that's great. So moving to the final question that they might ask, and this is a real indication that they're interested. The question might be, what kind of money were you looking for? What kind of salary were you interested in? And in this case, we want to make sure that we've done our research and we know what we're worth. We want to know what the job potentially pays. And in many states, including New York, there is salary transparency where they are pretty much required to list the salary range in good faith in the ad. Now, it's a good faith estimate. That could change. It could be different, but we can use that as a baseline. And one of the most important things is we do not want to apply for a job that doesn't pay us enough money to live. That's why we do a budget before we apply to jobs to make sure that we're getting paid enough to live the lifestyle that we have within reason, obviously. So that's a great segue. What kind of money were you looking for? So in that case, you would say whatever your number was based on what we found out from BLS.gov, what the median salary is for that area, and also from the job description. So if the job description said a range of 85 to 110, we might say 95 if we were just kind of graduating in mid-level. If we had a few years experience, now we ask for top salary because they could always come back to you with a counter. So if they said, what kind of money were you looking for? You would say something to the means of, well, I know that the range of the job is paying this, and I know that the industry standard is this. I'm looking for this. So I know the range of the job is between 85 and 110, and I know the industry standard is around 90, so I'm looking for the neighborhood of around 95. And that would be a great way to answer that. So just to recap, we've got our basic standard questions. Tell me who you are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Do you have any questions for us? What kind of money were you looking for? And then we have pivot questions that are based on the actual job description and what you might be doing in the day-to-day. And whenever we are posed those questions, we want to make sure that we are pivoting towards experience that we have, work that we can present and show in our portfolios. So good luck out there, and make sure that you're confident and practice these answers before the interview. One major key is to study that job description so that you understand what might be asked of you and you're ready to answer or pivot at any point.